very used to this new world of Zoom webinars and are putting their name and organisation in the chat. If you haven't done so already, please can I encourage you to do so. ERSA is delighted to have Mark Cosens with us this morning as part of our Thought Leadership series. Mark, what we're going to do is Mark is going to present the paper he's written to talk us through it. There will then be, I will go off screen, I'll leave Mark to it. There will then be the opportunity for questions, for a discussion. It's very much part of a dialogue within the sector as papers and thoughts and reports emerge. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mark. I'll go off screen, I'll go away, but I'll join you all later. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names there, and thank you for coming on to the webinar today. Yeah, the new normal, it definitely is, using these webinars. This is the first one I've given, so yeah, not nervous at all. So, employment response to coronavirus. Why do we create this report? Well, in a nutshell, really, I personally felt we needed to do something when we saw what was happening. First of all, you get the virus arrive, and it starts to creep up how serious it is. And then the other implications start to dawn about the social impacts as well as the health impacts and the economic impacts. And that's why decided to take up a friend's suggestion. We're discussing these things. Somebody I respect very much, very senior in the sector, who suggested that I write a report about it. I've done this twice before, at the beginning of the work programme and the work in health programme, but circumstances are very different. So I just first of all wanted to learn and to talk with people about what they thought this meant for our sector. So Covid-19, it changed the world. Started to see how much claiming was happening, how many UC claims started to shoot up. And that really sort of crystallized some of the other thoughts on this slide here. I've put a little bit more in the slides than I'm going to cover, so people can read them afterwards. But I'll touch on some of these thoughts here. So the first thing really, after wanting to learn and to try to get some thoughts straight about how we might improve the situation and respond to the employment crisis, or the unemployment crisis, thought about all of the mistakes and all of the injustices in many ways that have occurred with previous rounds and previous programs. Excuse me. I thought it was an opportunity for us to reset and to look at how we can really put together a set of principles, best practice, and the principles that so many of us know, if only it could be like this, and really start to work on putting those together and to structure them. And then it was really quite amazing to me how many people responded to conversations and shared their thoughts. So as I started to draft this report, it took on its own sort of life in a sense that just became a consultative process, and has ended up with over 150 contributors in one way or another that help us hopefully to focus on some of the main issues. When I say some of the main issues, I mean some of the immediate issues. Obviously, there's a huge crisis. There are huge numbers of people who are going to need help. A lot of those people are going to be displacing more vulnerable people as well. So we need to get the response right and at scale. That was something that didn't really exist, and well, still doesn't really exist, although it looks like hopefully DUP is moving in the right direction to bring it about and to actually apply some of some of the recommendations in this report. There's some evidence of that through feedback and through scrutinising what we can see so far in the framework, or the new version of the framework that was released yesterday. Okay, so one of the main drivers of continuing with this report was that there was a lot of work on short-term solutions or immediate capacity building, which obviously is needed. But that displacement issue was an important one. We didn't want to think that a lot of people with not heavy duty needs would flood onto existing disability programs or specialist support programs. And so the right kind of provision needs to be in place really to prevent that from happening, and to be sure that we've got the right type of provision for the right people and they can access it. So we recognise a capacity shortfall both in JCP and externally, and obviously the market has been cut significantly over the last 5-6 years, and we now have a shortfall in employability practitioners. So we wanted to make the case for them, wanted to make the case for our sector. You know, the fact that we do need employability practitioners, and we've now got a chance to design a way in which they can work to best effect. Okay, so those are some of the reasons for the report. Another reason was that it's very clear that young people are going to be affected very significantly by this crisis, and that there's a term of scarring and a generational issue that, you know, if it's not addressed quickly, then we really do have a big problem for the future with our younger generation. So I also recognise that there were far more able academic and better placed people than me to really drive that. And so I just wanted to contribute and share my thoughts, but recognise that a very strong agenda for youth unemployment was building at a real head of steam. So that was great. So while that was happening, we figured that, okay, that's great, but slightly longer term, in terms of the rest of the population, there needs also to be some thinking of that. So some differentiators were that we were looking at a mid to longer term set of recommendations, and also to serve more than just young people, although obviously young people crucially important and a big priority in the immediate to mid-term. Okay. Also, in a sense, it's a pitch. I wanted to talk to government, but with an authentic voice, really, from the sector, having served in the sector for many years, and recognise its value and just the good work that happens every day, and the goodwill and the amount of people who do go the extra mile. The fact that, in a sense, I've been saddened, recognising why, but I've been saddened over the recent years of a lack of the culture that we used to have, in some way. Not to hark back to the past, but there's so much goodwill, good people providing employment services at a large scale, that just recognise that can happen again, and we can learn from our mistakes of the past and actually improve things now. There is goodwill. A lot of people. All of this report, just as one example, is completely voluntary. Nobody commissioned it as such. Nobody did. So it's people have given their time and just recognise talking with people how people care about this matter. And so we really wanted to talk to government in a way that's effective, but also representative as much as possible of the authenticity of what's happening. So what is the advice that the report contains? I'm just conscious that possibly there's a mix of people who've read or not read the report. Obviously, we would encourage people to do so. First thing was to recognise that Job Centre Plus can't do it all alone. They couldn't do it all alone, in my view, before the crisis, and at scale, and now even more so. There's that need to help Job Centre Plus, which changed its culture and its emphasis very much so when it became more part of DWP and focused more on the conditionality and the processing of benefits side of things, and all of the drive of universal credit. So we wanted to help Job Centre Plus and other local partners, and to re-emphasise that need for partnership working. We also wanted to put some principles in that would give some food for thought and a bit of steer on opinion from the sector as to what would be an appropriate scale, a monetary scale, a financial scale, and some parameters and some principles that really do bring back the principle of investing to save, which again is something that kind of got kicked into the long grass, but is a very strong principle that, the funding that is put into these programs, it saves in lots of ways that are incalculable, but it saves the government in terms of first of all, the benefit payments, obviously, and also the associated costs of unemployment. So we just wanted to make that argument and push it again, that this is a cause that is worth investing in, and one that will return for the economy. And that's how we want to speak to government, as well as concentrating on more human and social implications for not having large-scale unemployment services in place. Definitely wanted to make the case to get the capacity of the sector, the outsourced sector, up again, and to really build on the excellent work of especially the Institute of Employability Professionals in trying to really bring best practice to the fore, to develop what it means to be an effective employability professional, and to build on all the expertise there and hopefully to expand that. We've given some suggestions on payment by results, started off 50-50, to really get people thinking and to work with that, to try to iron out some of the issues with the work programme, and also to make the programme viable to operate, viable to attract investment, and from a government point of view, one that represents value for money. So there are some principles that are embedded in there that hopefully will help us to operate viably in the future and be able to invest in the support that people need. And at the core of that is very much the principle of the funding following the individual and being the investment going into actually meeting individual personalised needs and not losing sight of that. So the mechanism for that would suggest to be an individual employment skills and health account, or a budget, or a discretionary pot to some degree, where employability professional or provider can make a case for spending on the actual needs that they've diagnosed, that they've assessed, and to take the job seeker through their journey of being provided with the right support at the right time, flexibly supported and properly funded for things like driving licenses, things like work clothes, travel, childcare, the things that are meaningful for the individual and their circumstances. It's a model that works extremely well with a multiple award-winning charity called Beam, who support homeless people into work in London. And it's been done in various ways through, for example, Working Well program in Manchester. There are similarities to the concept. Circle of Support through Kennedy Scott. But the principle is essentially that it's personalised training with a mechanism that links into all of the associated support around. It's got employability at the core, and it takes a job seeker through their journey with the right sort of support at the right time, and that's a managed and accountable process. Okay, so we've now had the framework that's come out, and some of those, before it happened, we suggested a number of things that we can't see anything in the framework at the moment that it just completely rules out anything that we've recommended. So, and there do seem to be some things that are different to the original framework. So looking at that now, that's very pleased with that. So that's there to scrutinise now and to work with. Okay, so further recommendations beyond the core principles and trying to get the case made to government and give some steer. Okay, look beyond it. So we're not just looking at a programme, we're looking at providing some hopefully thought-provoking material that, it correlates very much with what experts in the FE sector are saying as well about aligning employment and IAG and skills services in ways which align with a devolution agenda to make that real and to make it tailored and make it very contextualized on a regional basis. Okay. The second thing that was very important to recognise, I think, that we saw as an opportunity to improve the system as well as the integration of employment skills was to rebuild or to re-establish using data and using technology in ways which are possible now, a large organisations unit where you've got much better labour market information data informing localised or regionalised systems for linking supply and demand, linking the workforce, linking the job seekers with the actual opportunities that are there, and really linking into the officials and the LEPs and those responsible officers in those areas to make sure that services are aligned and that they're meeting actual economic need, actual local labour market need through the correct mechanisms. Okay. Obviously, then considering the other major skills investments that are aligned with the National Skills Fund, there's National Retraining Scheme, and nodding to those and recognising that there's an opportunity now for cross-departmental work, and really hope to see some very dynamic and very bold structural change, as well as just a very best of the best larger scale employment programme. Okay. There is a recommendation there to just think again about Job Centre Plus, Flexible Support Fund, if anybody's wrestled with BASWare and all of the process. And I've spoken with a lot of people about this. I don't know many who are happy or like it. It could be that some make a case about it being helpful for some discretionary funding. If you have an individual budget or an account at the core of a programme, you don't need it the same way. I don't think discretionary funding worked very well with Job Centre. It was very small amounts of money anyway. Few people accessed it. And in terms of small programmes through Flexible Support Fund, that was the feeling was that there's an opportunity with the consultation underway as well to apply that funding better. There's a few recommendations in that regard as well, and perhaps a good look at IAG as well as to how that works better with new systems and better labour market information and digitisation, and how we don't duplicate across so many different platforms, but start to bring some of this metadata together in a much smarter way and more accessible way. So a couple of other things there, employer engagement, obviously, and linking with apprenticeships very much. The key idea was that, and there are a couple of people who disagreed with this, but most people quite liked the idea of taking the opportunity to redefine an apprenticeship for being for younger people, and then really concentrating on the other funding, the National Skills Fund and National Training Budget, to really, and the AB and other funds to support adults, while it's a very clear package that the apprenticeship is then for younger people, addresses that immediate need, and there are lots of ways that can be worked with. Robert Halfin, the chair of the Education Select Committee, sent a very, very positive email yesterday in response to this report, and he sees, I think, some correlation with some of his proposals to the Prime Minister with like a guarantee or a measure for ensuring that young people have opportunities at this time. Okay, so structural reform. We made some recommendations about the framework and looking at a new flexible employment programme, which is really able to be contextualised and developed and evolved, that can bring on UK, the social fund, which should replace the European funding, and design it in an open way that it can follow some of the best practice and really dynamic learning from places like Manchester, where Working Well has a very clearly mapped journey into a devolved version of what was a national programme, but then sort of came from both sides with good, strong principles from the devolved side, and some core and performance related and contractual and centralized principles from DWP, brought together a program which is very strong. And some of the learning from that can as Eve Waite kindly mentioned from Sheffield City region, could be learned from and could be used elsewhere as well. Okay, so the new program at the centre of the recommendation should be designed to confront the mid to long term unemployment crisis, not just the shorter term issues. Okay, so we've got Job Centre Plus in the front line, absolutely swamped, valiantly battling against the absolute tide tsunami of unemployment now, borne out by the statistics, and a lot of the statistics are underlying that haven't appeared yet as well. So we need to confront the mid to long term unemployment crisis. Job Centre Plus is at the front line. There are excellent initiatives through larger sort of employer facing recruitment companies, and there are a lot of initiatives that are referenced in the report that do their part and are very good, particularly sector focused. Coding, there's a coding sort of escalator that works very well. There's an escalator in Lancashire area. There's a People Plus employer-facing initiative called Feed the Nation, which is focused on food distribution. Reader are doing an employer engagement campaign. There are lots of things happening, short term, medium term, mid-term, very good. There's ESF, some ESF programs can be capacity built. There's ESF underspend, there's AEB underspend. Good, okay, short to mid-term. But this report really focuses beyond that, and hopefully to get the structures and the systems better aligned to be more effective to address long-term unemployment, which we feel is going to overflow from all of the immediate and medium-term measures that are in place. Absolutely wanted to recognise the value and the strength of what we've built up over decades in this country of best practice and goodwill, and just the good spirit that happens in good organisations when they are helping people change their lives, pick them up, and really deal with the barriers and help them to get into work. That's what it's all about at the core of it, that we are really needing more people to help people. We need much better systems, but we can't just rely on the systems. Yep, so rescuing the longer term employment prospects of a lot of people, that's the point. It's going to be a lot of people. The unemployment rate is going to be very high. And that the demand side is so important in this is something that we've really tried to emphasize, and to include specific recommendations about employer engagement, employer best practice, really understanding where demand is, being responsive to that, and taking away perverse incentives within the systems, so that we really do get people into important sectors. Okay, and then a rationale, again, that principle of return on investment, where talking to the government, re-emphasising the point to the Treasury, where we've sent this, as well as the Cabinet officers and the other departments, that a lot of this work that's been going on with job retention scheme and loads of unprecedented initiatives needed emergency measures, but the transition out of that is also very important. And long term, a big part of the employment response has to be, in our view, a flexible employment program that's done well and delivered regionally, so that investment's not wasted. Okay, so we've had a lot of responses from the government, and also a lot of indications that the report has circulated really well in various departments, and so that's great. It's really encouraging that it's a time of change, and hopefully we can help to provide expertise from the sector, authentic perspectives, to address the key issues, hopefully, as much as we're able to do that. Okay, as I said, we can look at the new agreement, which has just been launched, to see what's possible through that and how we engage with that. The commercial agreement for the provision of employment and health-related services, no longer called the umbrella. That's good. So we've got a new name for a framework, and obviously that's just launched. Okay, so some key areas that perhaps the report might point towards are, how does this localization happen within the framework, the structure of the new agreement? How can the various parties partner better, smarter, and genuinely align, not duplicate services and meet local needs? The opportunity now is there for providers to really respond and to put their best practice forward. IEG, it's a big area of where that should be embedded, whether there's a need for a national careers service, whether that works well or not, and that's an area for exploration. Employer engagement, very much so, and then on the system side, more the integrated employment skills. A lot of providers obviously do deliver employability and skills provision, have done for time, and will recognise their own internal silos, matching government silos, and how it would be so good if we could just do this, this, or this. Well, perhaps government can now commission programs that allow providers to do the things that would be so good to do in the new normal as such, in the way that we respond to that. And partnership, again, there's a tier of the framework dedicated to smaller providers, and we've made some specific recommendations about that. So that's really all I wanted to share, and hopefully that's been helpful. And happy to talk about anything that anybody wants to ask about or to hear what people say about that.
Okay, it's Elizabeth again here. I can see we've got questions in the chat, which we can play two ways. I can ask Mark to have a look at these and pick them up, but equally I can bring people in. I noticed that Joe Ingold has raised a hand. I just need to be sure that Joe can speak, but I'm going to do that now. Joe, would you like to?
Yeah, hi, thanks Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Thank you, thanks so much, Mark. That was really fantastic, and just huge thanks to you for putting together such an impressive piece of work that is collaborative and also evidence-based. And I genuinely mean that, because it's one of the axes I grind, that that often evidence is not always considered as well as it should be. Obviously, I'm delighted that you've talked about employee engagement as being essential. I guess you could expect me to say that. And I have two questions relating to this. So one is, have you had much traction with the department commissioners in terms of employee engagement? Because as many people know, and you know, Elizabeth knows, Tony Carr and I have been doing this project on employee engagement in partnership with ERSA, and we're finding that I've tried for years to talk to people within DWP about employee engagement, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I just keep hitting a brick wall. They just don't seem to get it. They think it's an intractable issue, that basically they think that providers can essentially retrofit their employee engagement to whatever the commissioning framework is, and they really don't seem to get that how they commission and how they consider the demand side of employee engagement should be central to the commissioning, and which, as a number of you know, it's just highly problematic trying to retrofit that on the ground because of all the issues around the barriers to collaboration, the barriers to providing a more effective service to employers through providers collaborating, which was what my evidence showed. So that was kind of the first question, that I'm really quite worried about this. And the second one is large organizations unit. Great. I just wondered whether anybody has said they've already got that in the form of the National Employer Partnership Team. And I'll stop there because there's more that I could say, but I'll probably take a conversation offline with you on that.
No, yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Joe. They are important points. And I think that the only thing that I could say by way of evidence that there's anything happening on that front is I did see the other day a very specific sector-based initiative where where a regionalised team had put together that kind of response, where there was an employer engagement response that was driven by a regional, I'd never heard of it before, but a regional Job Centre Plus team. So something that obviously they'd seen something in an area and they'd gone together in a partnership to work on recruiting for that particular sector. I think that's will happen in the immediate run. There'll be ad hoc responses, but yeah, exactly as you say, that the system issue is that there's a disconnect between working with employers and also the issue of multiple bombardment of employers in an area, and some standardisation or some coordination of a national unit that used to exist, and some of the recommendations of how that can be better. Obviously, we would hope that will happen, but no, there's. I mean, yeah, we only see very little, don't we, of what's happening, but hopefully those things will come through.
Thanks, Mark. Keep banging that drum, I think, on all fronts. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Does anybody else want to raise a hand or questions in the chat? No? Alex Pollock.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, listen, Mark, thanks for doing that report. And I have to say, I only have managed to get the chance to read that very early on this morning. So I think you've done a great piece of work in putting that together in the time. I think one of the things, there's a number of things that come up for me when I look through the report, though, and I start to think about the implications in terms of the breadth and depth of the provider base and how best they can contribute to tackling the issues that we're going to come across. And I think I probably fall into the let 100 flowers blossom approach to how we move forward with this. So whilst I accept a lot of what you've produced is about a medium to longer term solution to tackle the problems, I would definitely fall into a category that says that right now we should be looking at all the things that we can do quickly to try and mitigate as many of the issues of unemployment from furloughed workers and others as we possibly can. And for me, that means things like ramping up investment and skill support for the unemployed. It does mean increasing the eligibility for work and health programme. It does probably mean putting in more funding to the Building Better Opportunities programmes. And actually, the one thing where I would completely disagree with you is I think there's a definite role for the Job Centre Plus DPS at this stage, because it can be used to help solve very local problems in terms of the increased levels of unemployment. And that can be done while still taking advantage of some of the examples that you said of good programmes from the past, like Programme Centre. So a Programme Centre model could very easily fit into Category 4 or Category 7 of the Job Centre Plus DPS programme, and it could be procured within a matter of weeks, and it could be up and running in July. And we could be having them all over the country right now to start to tackle some of the issues that we have. But I actually believe that all of those programmes should continue to exist alongside any other major programme that replaces work and health programme after that comes to an end. And on that point, what I noticed was, and maybe it's just my first reading of it, you touched on a solution here that suggests 2 primes per lot area. And when I did my sums on that, I was thinking, does that mean we're going to end up in this situation where we still have maybe half a dozen to a dozen prime contractors across the whole country at this stage, when my feel is there are a lot of smaller organisations, medium-sized organisations who could deliver these as prime contractors the length and breadth of the country. And I would be much keener to see a solution that was LEP-based.
Yeah,
so
perhaps I didn't come across. That is the recommendation. 2 per sub-region. And then there are different tiers, aren't there? So the ways in which DWP could work with the LEPs or the devolved governments or devolved authorities to design what's best, how they split those areas in their own regions. obviously.
So
That's why it's named flexible. Sorry, Alex.
So you would see that as like 2 providers for almost every region across the country, rather than the regions that DWP are talking about in the framework at this stage?
Yeah, what we've tried to do is to put in some working figures. Not to say this is exactly what government must do, because that's not our place to do that, but to recommend something to work with, whereby in some areas you might find more providers and more engagement with local providers, and in others not so. So the opportunity for the design to incorporate different tender approaches and propositions from providers, from prime providers, as to what they would do in those sub-regions.
Okay.
Inbuilt flexibility for that. So taking the best of what they would see. And in that way, there wouldn't really be room for duplication of commissioning a whole lot of other programs. I mean, those are things that, yeah, as mentioned, good in the shorter to medium term to keep those things going, but superseded with something that does provide a better framework for the whole country, albeit designed in an open, flexible way for the local agents and the local or the sub-regional specific propositions to find traction with what's needed in those areas.
Okay, I think I would still prefer to see some kind of mix. The other thing I would touch on, Mark, as well is, and it comes from the earlier point that was made, one of the things that I think worked really effectively at the end of the 1990s were the employer coalitions. When we actually had a national employers coalition and we had local employers coalitions the length and breadth of the country. And when you put the local large employers and the Federation of Small Business and the Chamber of Commerce and everybody else all in one room together, actually it has a momentum of its own where they almost compete with one another to try and help get people back into work. And I think that's something that we absolutely should be looking at a level, not just having the current boards that they have, but actually having employer coalitions for every area.
Yeah, there's some scope in there. I mean, just to suggest that there are some principles for bringing those kind of effective methods together in context. Absolutely, the things that work in some areas and don't work in other areas, but some of the core principles there in relation to the actual delivery and how, in terms of the commissioning, how that can be brought together. At the moment, I think hopefully we've struck the right balance of trying to put principles forward where they can be taken up from the bottom up and met from the top down in some way that there is scope for things to happen and for creativity to happen as well. Change.
I think we just need to keep pressure on to make sure that creativity still exists at the other end of it, and it doesn't just become a one-size-fits-all programme, which is always the danger with DWP. Listen, just one more thing, just before you move on, and I suppose it's the angle we come from. You suggest scrapping the National Career Service. There are some people that suggest maybe we should just scrap Job Centre Plus in its current form to come up with a more localised solution. And I just thought, just throw that one in as a little bomb before you talk about something else.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go along with that one. Sorry, Alex. That's a bit too radical.
Okay. I can see that we've got 3 participants who've raised a hand, but we've also got a question in the chat from David Kersey about labour market inequality and how it particularly affects women, people with disabilities and BAME people. David, I don't know whether you want to unmute and join us, or whether you'd just like Mark to respond to what is in the chat.
I'm really sorry, but I can't see the chat.
Oh, okay.
I'm seeing Q&A, but it doesn't open for me.
David, do you want to ask or comment?
Anyone hearing what I'm hearing? David?
Yes, unfortunately. Shall we move to Michael Lemming and then see if we can come back?
Hi, Michael. Are you there?
No. Does anybody else want to join us?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
It's Gavin here. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Mark, you mentioned about the guaranteed apprenticeships earlier on. I noticed also that BAE Systems have taken on committed to about 800 apprentices coming on board. I think that's a fantastic number for any prospective youth given the current climate. I'm just concerned about the apprenticeships only for youth kind of situation, and what your views were with that, and particularly with welfare to work. We're often seeing those who are have learning disabilities or neurodiverse left behind, whereas perhaps an apprenticeship maybe offer them some sort of prospects going forward. And what your views were on that?
I think apprenticeships it's a really, there's so many different challenges with it. First of all, just because of the crisis, it's just hammered apprenticeships at the drop-off rate of 80% a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if that's right, but obviously some of that will be temporary. But apprenticeships is a flagship government program with a lot of political capital in it. It's also potentially a very good route for job creation and for some very targeted wage subsidies in a very manageable way as well, and very clearly accountable way. And I think some of the recommendations are in the report are that, first of all, we pitch for some of that for the sector itself, that the sector can be defined as a sector that is funded with wage subsidies to employ and to train employability practitioners, and to apply all the best practice to do that, because that's what our economy needs now, and that's a place where we can invest effectively. And there are other sectors that are identified where that could also be the same. So investing in that sense. The fact that young people really do well, their national insurance contribution exempt, and the fact that there's such focus, and the fact that there's going to be such a challenge with youth unemployment, means that politically probably quite a lot can happen. And this is what's been high profile. The Prime Minister taking on and expressing publicly, yes, a need to do something for young people, perhaps with a guarantee or a wage subsidy with apprenticeships. We don't know any detail, but I think there's a lot of potential to do some very dynamic things there, and to have them within the new programme eventually, but in the even much before that, happening in targeted sectors. But I really think it would strengthen the brand, if you like, and the identity, and a lot of the willingness of employers to get behind them, if you really focused apprenticeships on younger people. And then you could also make a very clear offer, a distinct offer to adults who are 25 plus, through what they can come in with a huge bang, that's just been stuttering in the background with the National Skills Fund. And
there's an issue also with the levy spend, and people not understanding, particularly because we have a large portion of employers are small companies of apprentices. So look, 80% of people that are employing apprentices are actually small companies. So they have about 50 employees or less, and so there's not a huge understanding of the levy spend. The other aspect is transition from school into the world of work. As you know, the Department of Education has cut substantially the IAG budgets, and people being supported in that space. So there's a lot of confusion with youngsters going into the world of work, and there's not a lot of support. So there's a huge drop-off point. And particularly also if you have, let's say, neurodiverse challenges, And those things I think need to be plugged. I don't know what your views on that are.
So what the positioning of this particular report is to put in the right provision that takes away this is where I disagree with Alex somewhat. Obviously, some capacity building of specialist programs is important, and they do need to expand, I believe, but they're not the right kind of programs for the kind of job seekers who will come en masse, and then the existing participants in those programs are just going to be displaced. So we need the right provision for them at scale, and then there also needs to be better work at capacity building, the specific SEND provision. I don't know. I've had some mixed messages about how well FE colleges deal with SEND needs. Some obviously be fantastic. There are some issues.
I can tell you it's very poor, simply because the teacher retention rate is quite poor, and also there's a Department for Education issue there, and also there's a lot of with a lot of neurodiverse people. Colleges, there's a risk. They're not willing to take the risk because there's no guarantee that individuals' neurodiverse conditions will pass. And so my concern is how does JCP, the Department DWP, manage those risks and support those individuals going forward so that they don't fall off the cliff?
Again, what you said about apprenticeships, I think that there are other currently much more engaged routes with younger people with SEND issues that need to get that right. And then when if that's not got right, and younger people with SEND issues, challenges, need supported employment, they need different interventions, that's there locally. It's important for that before you get to a larger at scale, more mainstream employment program.
Yeah, there seems to be this chasm between the local authority and then the government overall, between who does what and how. Maybe that's something that needs to be cleared up as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll keep quiet now. Thank you very much for everything you've done. Cheers.
Can we bring Fran Perry in now, please?
Hi, can you hear me okay, Mark?
Yeah.
Hello, hi Fran. Yes.
Hi, good to see you, and I applaud you for your report. It's a great piece of work, and thank you very much for putting in the effort in. A very useful use of lockdown, top of the class. Now, I'd like to take it to the macro level, please. It's very easy for me because I'm now semi-retired and I'm not operational. I know the micro issues are very important, but we've been having a bit of a chat, which unfortunately you haven't been able to see whilst you've been presenting. And it's really about where are the jobs coming from? We already have at least 9 people per vacancy, and it's going to get a whole lot worse than that. From my personal experience, nobody I know who has been furloughed is expecting to actually go back into their job. This is much, much, much more massive than I think we're getting credit to it. And frankly, if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got. So we have to think very, very radically. And that means if DWP is not prepared to play ball with us, and I wasn't surprised to hear what Joe Ingold had to say, but I'm very sad that we still don't seem to have some proper joined up employer engagement out of DWP. We really should be speaking to business, energy and industrial strategy, and Alok Sharma might well be our man, but we have to go with some really radical ideas, and those radical ideas around things like Green New Deal, and we'd obviously have to call it something other than New Deal because the government chokes on that, but that's what it is, and it's infrastructure projects, and it's ILMs and environmental task force and all the kind of things that we know an awful lot about because we have hundreds of years of experience on those projects. But it's about job creation. It's not about going and seeing those employers that we've always seen, because they are not going to be there in their multitudes. So I think we have to think much, much, much more radically about where the jobs actually are. Otherwise, we're going to have an awful lot of people just languishing on programs, and there'll be beautiful programs. There'll be beautiful programs, but they won't be moving them on to work.
That's it. And so that's exactly right. I think that's why you've got immediate solutions and immediate capacity building, but still at the end of it, you need a solution that is going to take all of the people that come through all of that and are then at risk of long-term unemployment, not just unemployment. That's really where we need to get the design right for a larger program at the back end of the demoralizing journeys of people coming at all sorts of frustrations through, good as they are in the different ways, very challenged, difficult circumstances, ESF programs, local authority programs, Job Centre Plus support, there'll be a degree of success, but nowhere near like enough. And in the end, we will need to do something much better, much more employer focused, as you say, and demand led as well.
But I don't think I'm saying employer focused so much as saying this is about jobs that will have to be created that don't exist at the moment.
Okay.
I just genuinely do not think that the employers that were there are going to be there. So yeah, we can create a fantastic program, and no doubt it will be a fantastic program. But if we actually don't impress upon people like Alok Sharma the necessity of making sure that these green projects, these infrastructure projects, really kick off, and they kick off now, and they're massive projects, and they're massive jobs, and they're good jobs, and they're well-paid jobs, and they're new skills that people can be trained for, then we're not hiding to nothing, and we'll be having this conversation in 10 years' time.
That's right. Those recommendations are there, and Alok Sharma has received the report.
Yeah, has he come back?
No.
Keep on pressing that button. Would be my advice.
Okay.
You'll see that, well, unfortunately Mark won't see, but I have put in the chat that if anybody would like to join a small working group with me, and we will seek to engage with Alok Sharma, I'm definitely prepared to sort of take that forward from an ERSA point of view. So please get in touch. Okay. Anybody else wants to raise a hand? No. I think maybe then we are coming to a close. Can I just say a huge thank you to Mark for the work he's done on this report, for his determination, his collaboration, involving other people in it. It's a very important piece at this time. Also, thank you to Mark for joining us this morning, because I think these opportunities for the sector to share the ideas and to talk to each other as we take them forward are really valuable. So thanks again for that. ERSA's planning a schedule of these, and we're also working on an idea that we try and get a panel discussion together with, I'm putting Mark on the spot here, but with the likes of Sean Williams and Mark Cosens and Tony Wilson and Patrick Hughes and others that have offered to do the thought leadership pieces about putting them together. Anybody else who'd like to join us and contribute, please send an email to events@ERSA. We've got a whole schedule being developed, so please follow the bulletins, check the ERSA website, and thanks to everybody who's joined us and to the contributors this morning, but again, particularly to Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thank you.